Welcome to the pleasures, pressures, and perils of technology, a four-part mini-series initiated by the Bas Medrash and by Judy, and from what I understand, based on popular request, if not demand. And let me first apologize for coming late. I kid you not. It's simply that my technologically advanced printer decided that it had a big problem, as you may see soon. And my GPS took me the wrong way. Didn't know that the back door was locked. There was supposed to be a shortcut. So I apologize for being late. And I think that it's worthwhile to point out a few ground rules. No fighting. Be nice. Okay. And the reason I say that, besides for the obvious, is because I think that the course that Judy has kind of constructed or weaved together strikes to search for a balanced approach. What's the balanced approach? Okay. No, I didn't say Rambam. A balanced approach, and I mean that in two ways. Way number one is that, or maybe three ways. Way number one is striking a balance between where we're sitting here, and that's a Beit Midrash. And a Beit Midrash is a place of study, place of delving into Torah texts, from Tanakh down to modern day posting. So there's going to be a learning element, a Torah element, and at the same time, as she wrote, penetrating, controversial, thought-provoking, possibly life-changing. Possibly life-changing means that we're going to also address practical ramifications for our everyday living and how we interact with all forms of technology. So that's balance number one between study and kind of practical counsel or guidance, if you will. The second balance that we're going to strike, I think, is, this is a big topic, and we're gonna not only try to solve the world's problems. In other words, you could talk about the big tech, the military-industrial complex taking over, big issues of the world. Interesting, but I think it's beyond the scope of the series. We're going to keep it more in the Reshut HaYachid, the realm of our own private domain and personal Dalet Amot of 4 cubits. At the same time, I think we're going to not go to the other extreme of, there's going to be an underlying assumption that we're not talking about the deepest and the darkest, which definitely exists in the world of technology, but try to talk about like every person's interaction in the quote unquote, if there is such a thing, the neutral zone of technology. So that's a balance, not too like widespread solving the world's social dilemmas, but at the same time, not going too much into the deepest and the dark. And sure. I would need more information to answer that question.
Yeah, I was wondering, because that's what I heard.
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
And the internet is not an entity. The internet is people.
Right. So okay, we could talk about that. I think also the balance, the third balance. I don't think that I think there's going to be some things here which are black, and there are going to be some things which are white. But I think that over this 4-week course, there's going to be shades of gray, because if so, I don't think it would have taken 4 weeks to talk about things that are so clear-cut.
And when are we gonna get to
The color, now that's modern inventions. I can't handle color. So having kind of said that, I want to tell you what we're going to do today. And today we're not going to talk about Satan may play a role today. He could be starring in today's sources, but I want to give us a perspective. I want to give us what I've always looked for, a kind of a Torah-based infrastructure, how to even relate to these questions. Because believe it or not, technology was not invented today. And as I love to tell people, I just took my kids in the Science Museum last week, and I had a printing press from like 150 years ago. I said to them that you should know that this was more of a revolutionary technological device than this. And that's not the topic for today, but I could read you, for example, I'm actually in my original plan, it was it was probably part of the syllabus, maybe in the 4th class, a description of the information overload. And now everyone is able, and them and their, and their grandfather are able to print books of meaningless information. And there's so much information, and who can do it? Everyone's wasting their time and go on and on and on. And what am I talking about? Not the internet, but these are descriptions of the printing press and the advent of the printed word. And so when you talk about information overload and information technology, which is just one small part of technology, we've been there before. And I think it's interesting to get that perspective and help us perhaps get the kalim, the instruments and the empowerment to know how to deal with it. Because so I guess without further ado, I want to basically uncover what I believe is a hidden story within the text of Bereshis, which deals no less than with the question of technology. And what we have to do to understand this is just kind of free up our association with that T word and the internet, the smartphone, social media. And remember, like I said about the printing press, it's a lot bigger than that. It's the air conditioning, it's the chair, it's, as we will see soon, it's so much of the world that we already take for granted. So I'm going to pass out these source sheets. I'm going to start over here. And over here, these are not stapled. Some of them are stapled. Some of them are more rubbed out than others. You'll have to forgive me, the limits of the printing press. Yeah, it was, if anything can go wrong, will go wrong, trust me. Passing it out. Did you get? If there's more than 20, I'm afraid you're going to have to share. Is more than 20?
It's the intention is that people would share.
Sure. Okay, sure. I guess I'll use my.
We like to text each other.
Text in. Text in. Okay. So. Okay. So we shouldn't be surprised that I'm suggesting that the key to understanding technology and the way we interact with it is actually found in the opening chapters of the Torah. Because if we see something which we today, 5,782 years after creation, are so grappling with, so trying to make heads and or tails of, it must clearly then be something deeply connected to the human experience. And anything connected to human experience is rooted, almost by definition in my book, in the stories of the Bria, of the creation, specifically of Adam and Chava. Yet if you read it, you're not going to see anything neither about an iPhone nor a printing press. We know the story, but I want to look at it through new eyes, and these are the eyes of Chazal. Some of what we're going to see may be familiar, but maybe we never put it together in quite this way. And I think it's, at least for me, almost a chilling narrative that emerges from the simple reading of Chazal in the text. So I'm going to take you, and again, pardon me for the problems. The sources here are, of course, in Hebrew and English. I did not have it didn't work for me to write where they're from, but you'll recognize this as being from towards the end of Parshat Bereshit. It's in the middle of the boring part. That's the part where you hear all the generations after Hevel is killed. Cain has his 7 generations, and then there's a third son, Shet, who has Enosh, and then for the next 10 generations, from Adam to Noah, we get the barest, most stark description of when he was born, what his name was, how old he was when he had kids, and so on and so forth. And we get down to about the 9th generation, and here we find the following words. Vayechi Lemech, 82 shana. There was a person called Lemech, and he lived 182 years. Vayoled ben, and he begat a son. Vayikrat shmo Noach, and he called his name Noah. And this is usually where the text stopped up to now. Up to now, we got the name and then just the genealogical bare facts. Here, the Torah supplies us with a reason. Why did Lemech call his son Noah? Lemor, saying, Ze yenachamenu, this shall relieve us, minama aseinu, from our work, umi itzvon yadenu, and from the misery of our hands, mino adama, from the ground, asher era Hashem, which the Lord has cursed. That is why Noach is called Noach, the word Noach, which you and I in modern Hebrew would translate as what? Comfort. Noach, right? Comfortable, easy, right? Here it's translated as relieve us. Zeyinachamenu. Almost to as you comfort a mourner, we call that nichum aveilim, right? To console, to relieve us from our work. And if I would ask you, if you wouldn't know this was a technology shiur, I would be thinking, and probably most first graders who read this would think that, oh, why is his father calling this kid Noach? How is he going to save us from our misery and from the ground which the Lord has cursed? You're probably going to say, I would say, you're talking about the flood, that there was some kind of prophetic revelation, and there is a chazal like that, al shema atid. In other words, he kind of foresaw that Noah was actually going to save the world by being a tzaddik and by building the ark and by basically being that voyager into the post-flood world. That's what I would have thought, but it doesn't exactly fit here. It could kind of fit if you force it, right? But what it doesn't make, why not? Why can't you say this talking about the flood?
Not necessarily a belief that it was a flood, because if he got into the nation,
Also,
then they would have been.
right, you're taking for granted there's going to be a flood, but hey, who said there had to be a flood, right? You could have avoided the problem. So that's already one problem with understanding this is talking about some future misery, some future ground, some future curse. And also, it just, there is an element in the flood. If you recall the verses, the text does talk about that the earth was destroyed. There was an element of a tishacheta aretz, a tishacheta adama, and we do see that. So it could go there. But Chazal don't take it. Right. In other words, you'd have to kind of do this kind of future, past, present thing. Right. So there's something else. There's some other problem here. What is the other problem?
Why would it say that?
Why are they making themselves have misery of their hands?
Where's the misery of their hands? What's the misery? So if you're only reading Pshat, you're reading for the first time Sefer Bereshis, you're reading it in one swoop. Okay, I took you this little snippet here. What is the problem that Noah apparently is destined to solve? Not a future problem. By the way, this is just interesting to always look at this, that we're introduced to Noah not in Parshat Noah, but at the end of Parshat Bereshit. It works that way a lot if you pay attention. Avram is also introduced to us not in Lech Lecha, at the end of Parshat Noah. We learned the Torah by Parshat Shavuot, so we kind of forget what happened last week. So just worthy to know. This is the end of Parshat Bereshit. So if we go back to the beginning, what are we going to find that evokes the idea of itzvon yadeinu, misery of our hands, a ground which has been cursed? It seems to remind me of something, right? Obviously, what? Adam and Chava, 10 generations earlier. To the best of my knowledge, there are charts you could find at the back of your chumash. Very interesting to know who saw who. That they're living like hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're seeing not just great. I mean, they're seeing many generations of progeny. So it's surprising to know who knew who. I don't think Noah actually saw grandfather Adam. I don't think it works out, but he may have seen a grandfather Enosh. It may work out that way. You could check it out and do the calculations. No, Avram was 48 at Tower of Babel. So this is taking us back to something which, in the life of his father Lemech, who may remember as a boy, Uncle Cain, right? This is not necessarily so far away. And this takes us back to the fall from Eden, the expulsion from Gan Eden, and specifically to the curse of Adam. We could talk about the other curses there, the snake and the woman, but let's read the verses about that and see, if you could mark it up or draw a line. We're talking one-to-one. There's a clear textual bridge between the two. Ula Adam Amar, God said to Adam, Ki shamata l'kol ishtecha, because you heeded the voice of your wife, and you ate the tree that I commanded you, saying you shall not eat from it. Arura adama ba'avurecha, cursed is the ground on your account. Be'itavon tochalena kol yemei chayecha, suffering shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Right? It's going to be with suffering. It's going to be with misery all the days of your life. V'kotz v'dardar tatzmiach lach, thorn and thistle shall it grow for you. V'achalta et esef hasadeh, and you shall eat the vegetation of the field. B'zeh tapecha tochalecha, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread. Ad shucha al adama, until you return to the ground. Ki mimena lukachta, for from it you were taken. Ki afarata ve'lafar tashu, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So now let's try to put that together. What then is Lemech, father of Noah, predicting, or at least hoping for his son Noah? Break the curse. Specifically, which there were a lot of curses there at the expulsion from Gan Eden, specifically the curse connected to the earth, to the ground, right? And you see the word specifically, right? Let's go back for a minute to the verse from Noah, right? He's called Noah. Zeyinachamenu mimasenu mimitzvon yadeinu. That's clear parallel to the word, right, of itzavon, right? You see the word itzavon, right? Like here, unfortunately, the Steinsaltz did not translate it, in my opinion. They should have kept it synced, right? It should have been misery in both, or suffering in both, right? That the earth is going, there's arura, that the God cursed. Where did God curse the ground? It's here, right? And the opposite of the curse is kind of the nechama. We need the relief from the curse. And that is Noah, who is bringing the nechama, he's bringing the relief. the one thing we're not told is how does Noah go about this? And we're talking about before Parshas Noah, before the flood, right? There's a hidden story. You know, was this just kind of a fanciful wish on the part of his father? You know, if you didn't know, maybe some of you already peeked ahead at the Medrash I bring. But you know, if you didn't know any better, but just reading it now, you're like, what's Noah gonna do? You know, is he gonna? How would you fix the earth? You know, maybe find a hidden path back to Gan Eden. You know, you can kind of dodge the revolving fiery sword and go back to the Derech Eitz Chaim. Maybe he'll I don't know what you're gonna do. You're gonna daven and you know do tshuva and somehow it's gonna turn around. The Adamah is gonna become again a blessed land of Eden. I don't know. But Chazal fill it in, and isn't it surprising? Before I take you to the next stage, did I mess this up? Oh man.
It's the Rashi.
It's the Rashi and the Medrash. So before we go to the Rashi that does not appear here in the Medrash, which somehow escaped my cutting and pasting. Before we do so, let me just mention a fact. I would like to kind of draw a parallel. Fast forwarding 5,700-ish years to point out that where we get our food from is no simple matter. And the idea that the earth can sustain us with its bounty in its food should never be taken for granted. And I will point out that in the end of the 19th century, there was a problem in Europe. And the problem was the land wasn't fertile enough to sustain the growing demands for food. And how do you make land fertile? Well, you fertilize it. And originally Europe was importing a tremendous amount of, am I pronouncing this correctly? Guana. That's like iguana without the I, right? Right? Guana from Chile. Now, guana is seagull droppings, and it is super rich in nitrates, which are needed. Garda, you can help me.
I always heard it was from the penguins.
Oh, I heard both. I heard both actually. They needed this, and that was really the key to feeding Europe was importing by boat this guana, and the problem was that the guana was running out, and the soil was not fertile enough. And there was a Jewish chemist in Germany, an assimilated Jewish chemist. His name was, I always blank on it. I just like looked at it, like that's not even my computer. I can't even go there. Haber, right? Fritz Haber, who was a bright chemist in whatever institute, probably Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, who discovered a wonderful way to get nitrates, literally out of thin air, because the atmosphere, the air we breathe, is of course majority nitrogen. Just the problem was, how do you get that nitrogen out in a usable form? And through things which are beyond my understanding, a lot of heat, a lot of pressure, a lot of energy, he was able to create, again, you have to forgive me, these technical terms come into my mind. I like every time I give this year, I then kind of look it up, and it like just goes blank. But to ammonium nitrate, I believe it's called, what we would call artificial ammonia, which was the basis for artificial fertilizer, which is still used today in the cornfields of Iowa, and then I'll mention at the end, all over the world. This was a boon for the world. It's estimated today that over half the world's population eat based on this tremendous invention. It earned him the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1980. Okay, pause there, rewind to Noah. Noah, and again, I totally apologize. The Medrash, I'm going to read it to you from Balpe. You know what, I'll just save time. I'll read it to you. Is it? I'm like, no, I want a different Medrash. Sorry. What? Did I bring it? I brought 3 Midrashim and 1 I left out. Okay. I'm taking it. Again. Manoma manidaber. Okay, hang on for 1 second. Okay. 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 All right, I'll just read you. We'll just do Rashi. Thank you. Says Rashi, citing the Medrash, how is Noah going to relieve us from Chet Hadat, from the klala of the Adamah? Says Rashi, Ad shelo ba Noach, until Noah came, lo hayalem klei machrisha. There was no implement of the plow. There were no agricultural tools. Vehu hechin lehem. Noah invented the plow. Now, kids know this Rashi. Okay, very cute, very nice. But take a step back and ask, how does this fit in? How did Noah solve the problem of the curse of Gan Eden? How did Noah solve humanity's problem? He invented the plow. And this is what his father was foretelling by calling him Noah. The source must be. And the idea that Noah created the plow, now again, coming back to the beginning of this year, the plow, we have to understand in historical context also, is high tech, right? You may think that John Deere, that's like not Silicon Valley, but if you look it up, top 10 inventions of all time, no matter who's counting, will include the printing press, will include the screw, will also include the plow, And Noach be'inei Chazal, in the eyes of Chazal, is perhaps one of, if not the original inventor. But if you put 1 and 1 together, okay, very cute. Noach invents the plow. That's so nice. That's so, so helpful. But if you put 1 and 1 together, you come out with an unbelievable idea that what is going to be humanity's solution to its original problem, to its original curse, to being kicked out of the Garden of Eden? Are you telling me it's the inventor? Noach, the inventor, that's going to be the thing that's going to cure us of the curse of Adam Arisha?
Well, this curse was that it's going to replace sweat and scraps, to be easier.
Right. So, isn't that interesting? Meaning this quote unquote spiritual problem, this fundamental spiritual problem of being expelled from the Gan, is all of a sudden in Chazal being somehow relieved or maybe solved by an invention. I mean, as Rav Shagar points out, that it's kind of this like full circle. The original sin of Adam was wanting to be, as Hasidim say, Ana Emlo. I want to be Itim Ke'Elohim. And that basically created, I'm the boss, and it basically caused this kind of disjuncture between humans and nature. And as Chazal say, that it says that the quotes for the ReStarTzfat, it's going to grow thistles and thorns. Even if they planted seeds, the earth was kind of rebelling against humanity until came Noah, and with like extra human ingenuity and invention, what did he do? He kind of put everything back into balance. He achieved a certain Eden-like state through his invention, which is a surprise. We're not going to stop there. Don't, just like with that guy Fritz Haber, we're not going to stop. Mr. Hero, Mr. Fritz Haber, and we're not necessarily going to stop with Noah, the tzaddik Tomim either.
Right, maybe it wasn't the technology that fixed, maybe the fact that Noah and tzaddik, that ReStarTzfat. In other words, that was a spiritual fix. That was why he made him the person chosen to have this device to lead mankind and its source. It's a spiritual, physical connection that would.
So if you go that route, you're saying, well, we can't ignore Parshas Noah. Tzaddik tamim haya b'dorosav. Noah is righteous. He's a tzaddik. So how do these two things go together? Chazal obviously know this, and so that they're putting the tzaddik hador, the lamed vav tzaddik, is now becoming the great inventor. One, if I understood you correctly, it's bizchus his Torah and his ma'asim tovim, he was zoche in a world that the way it's supposed to be. He's the one who brings down the solution. So this is it was born b'kedusha. The plow was born b'kedusha, as opposed to maybe some other devices. So in other words, what is the nature of this invention depends on who is bringing it down.
I bet there were people against him.
Oh, we know there are people against. It's what I just jump for a moment to the printing press. Jumping throughout history, I looked far and wide to find were there Jews who spoke against the printing press. Were there Rabbanim who spoke against the printing press? I did not find it. I even find this is Mamar Musgar, and again, I beg of you, I really, we're in a base Medrash now. The first class, this is the base Medrash side. Classes 2 and 3 are going to be more of practical ramifications. So don't immediately go and connect the dots. It must be that this is great or this is horrible. But it's so interesting to me, and I always say this, that Rav Nosson of Breslov by no means was an advocate certainly not of the Enlightenment in any way, shape, or form. He was so outspoken against any semblance of Haskalah, but he speaks in divine terms. If you come to the library, we actually have a plaque with a picture of the printing press and a quote from Rav Nosson, what a wonderful gift of Hashem it was to give us the printing press. This is how the Torah is established in our generation. When people first had the printing press, it was so unbelievably divine that, you're pardon me here, this is a Mamar Musgar, this is in parentheses, a parenthetical, how do you say it? Sliding away. All right. I'm allowing myself that. Digression, thank you. People couldn't believe it. There's a story which is brought in several sources that a Lahavdil, a Bible salesman, was making his rounds in Paris to the theological seminary there, and they placed a regular order for such and such Bibles, and he came back a week later with the 100 copies, all perfectly printed, bound, laid out. They wanted to burn him for witchcraft. And so the earth, it hadn't gotten there. The Besorah, the news that there's a printing press, which proves what one of the great thinkers, I'm not going to say his name in the base Medrash, but one of the great thinkers about these subjects in the 20th century said that any technology advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic. In other words, there's no, when the little phone that begins with an I came out, the phone that shall not be named, the iPhone came out, it was dubbed in the Wall Street Times and the New York Times as pardon me, not the iPhone, but the J phone, and the J was, JES, etc. That's what it was called. This was like, wow, look that up. It was like, this was like, that's what it's called. G-E. I don't mind saying, but you're probably more marked than me. Jes2s. That's what it was called. If someone else wants to say, thank you. I know people are sensitive. I don't want to offend anyone. Okay. So, but this was like, whoa. So coming back to where we are now, the idea that something kind of so physical or technical can be so wondrous, just really depends on your perspective. And you're saying that Hashem, I'm coming back to the idea of the divine gift. The printing press was perceived as a divine gift, so you have to be zoiche for it. Tzaddik Tamim is zoiche. We'll see that perspective. Maybe it's not by accident. All the Jews got the Nobel Prizes. So Professor Haber back then in 1918, a grace of tzaddik. He must have, b'skus avois of Akdoshim. He must have been zoiche to be the Noah of his generation and able to feed humanity. Not so fast. Okay, don't Google him, please, while we're speaking, because there's going to be a flip side to his plowshare. Now, let's go back and see. Is this really the first time that the Torah talks about technology? Or where did Chazal, okay, I understand. Chazal have a problem. Chazal know that it's the sweat of the brow. There's toil, there's misery involved in eating. And, the Chazal know that the thing that was probably like the number one implement to improve the situation was the plow. Noach improved the situation. So he is the father of this technology. But is this the first time? So let's go back and look at the psukim. And it's clearly not the first time. Okay, we continue. Let's go back. Noach is from the lineage of Seth, Shes, right? Shes, the third son of Noah. There's a lineage which seems to be wiped off the map. It's the lineage of Cain. And Cain was, not a favorable person. He killed his brother, the first murderer.
Except that Noah's wife.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. Why that's important. So this is beautiful. So watch this. So if you go back in the Psukim, we're going back earlier, like the Shlishi or V in Bereshis, and we find, oh gosh, look at that. Isn't it interesting? There's another Lemech. Right? Noach's father was Lemech. There was someone else called Lemech. Don't be confused. One Lemech lived, 1,000 years later. He was the 8th generation after Adam. This is Lemech. He is like the 6th generation after Adam through Cain. Vayikach lo Lemech shtei nashim. Lemech took 2 wives. Shem achas Ada v'shem Hashem is Tzila. The name one was Ada, the other one was Tzila. But Teled Ada is Yovel. So Ada gave birth to Yovel, where Avi Yoshev Olam Mikna. He gave something tremendous for society. He was a forerunner of those who dwell in tents and raise livestock. As opposed to hunter-gatherer, he was raising livestock in one set place. And he had a brother, B'Shem Achiv Yuval, and he was the Avi Chotofes king of Ugav. He was the forerunner of all those who grasped the harp and pipe. He was the forerunner of the arts, of that aspect of civilization, the harp and the pipe. But there was another wife, and her name was Tzila, and she also gave birth to Tuval Cain. And what was Tuval Cain's contribution? He was the Lotesh Kochorish Nachoshes Barzel. He was the forger of every sharp instrument of bronze and iron. And by the way, they had a sister, and his sister was called, Tuval Cain's sister was called Naamah. So why do I need to know that? Okay, obviously she wasn't the only woman born ever, because otherwise, right? So, as the question goes, who was Mrs. King? So Chazal, you don't even, before Chazal, you already picked up, there's already someone forging iron, right? What is a plow? If not, some kind of iron implement. It was the original plow was not a John Deere. It was like a digging stick. There's midrashim that literally it's von Yedenu. They were actually kind of carving out the earth with their hands. They even have webbed fingers. You're familiar with that Medrash? That's connected to this. They were doing it by hand, literally. So Rabbi Yeshua of Sichnin says in the name of Rabbi Levi, what is this name Tuval Kain? Okay, Tuval, fine, but why would you name someone Kain? Lamech is naming his son Kain. Kain is great-grandfather Kain, right? The murderer. So the Medrash plays on these two words, Kain, the murderer, and Tuval, connected to the word like tavlin, spice. Rashi also brings Medrash, of course. And Tuval, I'm reading from the Hebrew, that I read from the English. Yeshua the Sittim Shem Reb Levi Amar Zet Taval Averato Shel Kain. He refined Cain's transgression. Kain harag v'lo b'mal haro. Cain murdered but did not have the implements to kill. Right? The Medrash says he didn't know how to kill. He used his bare hands or a rock. Or, it was a messy job. Pardon me. Aval Zeh Tuval Kain, one who refined Kain. What did he do? Lotesh kol choresh nechoshes barzel. He created, as we translated above, every sharp instrument of bronze and iron. He's the father of weaponry, right? Of weapons. And that's interesting. Now, isn't it interesting that this Lamech has a daughter called Nama, and the Torah goes out of the way to tell us who Nama is? Why do I need to know? So the Medrash fills that in. She was the wife of Noach. And why was she called Naamah? Because her actions were pleasant. So I'll try to put this family picture together a little bit at this point. So Noach has a wife. Her name is Naamah. I always wanted to say, why do we need to know that her name is Naamah? Because if you think that we are all descendants of Noach, if Noach came from Shet, then basically the lineage of Hevel and Cain basically didn't make it past the flood. That's not true, because Noach had a wife. And from Mrs. Noach, Naamah, basically we all, Shem, Ham, and Yafes, all come from Cain's lineage. We all come from Tuval Cain. It's interesting to note that. However, if we take it one step further, we now have a kind of a picture of a family business, meaning the two Lemechs were Mechutanistims, right? Right? If Naamah married Noach, which are actually interesting plays on the same word, Noach meaning pleasant, and Naamah meaning Naim, also pleasant, like comfortable, and comfortable marries pleasant, right? Which is really in need in those days of this itzavon, of this misery. So what happens? So Noach, as he marries into a good family, Lamech, father of Noach. He marries into like the Krupp's family, right, of Germany. He marries into this, this steel magnate family who are producing weapons. Except if you're Lamech and you're coming from Mesushelach and Chanoch, let's say the more redeemed lineage of Adam Arishon. So I got a great idea, right?
You said descendant from Tuval Cain. He descended from his sister.
His sister, right? So I thought more from Cain, but so help me out then. So basically, right? But Lamech gives his daughter. Right? There's two Lamechs, right? So right, Lamech is giving his daughter to the other Lamech for his son Noach, and right. So it's the brother-in-law. It's always the brother. In all the goods, it's always the brother-in-law, right? So Noach has a brother-in-law. When we go into business, brother-in-law, what's your business? Well, I don't know. And Naamah says, trust me, you don't want to go there. But, right? If you take Tuval Cain's forging and Noach's tzidkus, you come out with a Zeyanachamenu. You come out with a plow that seems to be bringing a kind of geula to the world. Right? Meaning it's obvious that what we're talking about here is that, number one, imminent in the idea of technological prowess is a double-sided, two-edged sword, right? There's the sword, and then the other side of the sword, the Torah and Chazal seem to be telling us is what? Is the plowshare. Did we ever hear about that anytime? Right? Just Yeshaya, next page, on the other side. Why is it in Achrit HaYamim? We all know this nevuah, but now we have the context for it. Right? Talking about the Mashiach, who's going to be the ultimate bringer of Geula. V'shafat bein hagoyim, he will advocate between the nations. V'ochiach la'amim rabim, and he will rebuke many peoples. Kitetu charbotam li'itim, they will beat their swords into plowshares. V'chanitotehem lemazmerot, and their spears into pruning hooks. Lo yisagoy al goy cherev v'lo yimedu al milchama, no nation will lift a sword against nation without learning war anymore. We all know that nebuah, but pitom, all of a sudden you understand that it's not coming out of nowhere, because what really happened was that was kind of, there was this original flipping where it seems, and this I want to suggest as a prototype for all technology, is that, a lot of times, as Chazal say, Kabbalah says, the klipa kodemes the pri, the husk precedes the fruit, the dark precedes the light, the evil or the misfunction or dysfunction precedes the function. And if you have Tuval Kayin, I'm suggesting, was discovered the ability to manipulate iron for mal use, Tovel Umanatosha Kayin, for murderous purposes. It's when they marry into Noach that he's able to kind of flip the flaw and bring a geula. It seems that this somehow flipped back over the generations. So basically, Mashiach is being described, the one who's going to bring the ultimate geula, is being described as someone who will do the same thing Noach did, Zeh Nachamenu, and put the sword back into being a plowshare. Now, we're not going to stop here at the moment. We have a couple more steps. What we can say, though, is that when we come in the next 3 weeks to talk about technology, we're not talking about a technical question. The issues we're talking about are be'omdim berumo shel olam. We're talking about nothing less than, in other words, how could an iPhone be satanic? In other words, forget the question or the answer to that question. But if Wall Street Journal could call it the J phone, then the and not by accident, Judy knows that I like this. The Los Angeles Times was the first to draw the comparison of the Apple logo to what? Why is that ubiquitous sign of the beaten out apple? Steve, of course, I happen to be a Bucky. You'll forgive me. You may want to not let me come back. I had to be I don't think many people with payas or beards as long that know much about Steve Jobs as I do. But Steve Jobs, never heard of him. The J phone, the inventor of the J phone. He's the inventor of the Apple.
He doesn't on his own, so bring out.
He doesn't. It's a beautiful quote. You can look it up on the. They asked him, "Oh, your kids really must be enjoying this iPad." He goes, "No, I don't let my kids use. We limit what our kids use at home on technology, quote unquote." But anyway, interesting. Just we are talking about something of geula proportions. What we do and how we deal with technology is something as old as Sefer Bereshis, as Adam and Chava and their descendants. And we see that this is a dynamic of towards the light or towards the dark that is played out in the opening chapters of the Torah. Yes.
Why is inserted here? Because you needed the voice of your wife.
Oh. So I'm not gonna, I had a yetzer hara. I had a little bit of an evil inclination. Oh my God, I just thought I was gonna ask that. Maybe I'll just like put 3 dots, point to the lips, and we'll just that question is beyond the scope. That's simply the narrative of Genesis. Not that is beyond the scope of this class. But that's a question in Genesis, right? Eve tells Adam, eat. So God says, hey, Adam, why'd you eat? He says, she gave it to me. So why'd you listen? That's in a nutshell beyond the scope of this class. That you can't blame me. So now that we've kind of seen that basically it's something else also. And this is the idea, which I say this very cautiously. I can't preach this. I can't say for sure. But what is being kind of teased out of these sources, and I think this is appropriate for next week. I'm curious to hear Rabbi Gorenstein, who's going to kind of present the Chabad approach. Isn't it interesting? The Chabad who kind of are advocates of the great potential of technology, and they're also the ones who are the great harbingers of, Geula consciousness, 1 degree or another. So, it's interesting to note the connection that could technology actually be some kind of tikkun of Eitz Hadat, which by definition is Geula. You understand that if I'm attacking Eitz Hadas, I'm coming back to Eden, which is a way of talking about Geula. However, I know that the time is short. Can we have 3 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Anyone needs to leave, can leave, She gave away your 7 minutes there, but you go for it. We're going to hear about Fritz Haber. So isn't it interesting? I want to take you back to Mr. Professor Haber. He actually was offered I think he actually tried to make Aliyah at the end of his life. However, he had a very difficult life. World War I comes, and the Allied forces are against Germany. So, isn't it interesting that ammonium nitrate, I forgot what it's called, if you don't have, the Allied forces have that guana to make their nitrate, to make their bombs, explosives, use ammonium nitrate. Again, I may not be saying the right compound, but you look it up. And but they put a blockade on Germany, and they can't get what they need from the guana from Chile anymore. So where are they going to get it from? Oh, isn't it interesting that the same component, the same chemical compound that makes that great fertilizer was used in the German bombs. So you see it again. And this teases itself out in both directions. He goes on to develop the first chemical weapon, cyanide gas, which was used in the trenches in the war in France. So he's the inventor of that as well. His wife apparently committed suicide, perhaps because of that. He stands by it, but unfortunately, in 1933, he of course is, as assimilated as he was kicked out of his position in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. What I'm trying to show you is flip-flopping here. Back, I want to show you something like. Maybe you should investigate. Was it suicide or homicide? I don't know, but all those poison compounds going around the house. I'll just tell you a funny joke. It's not right. It's
Just finish the thought.
Okay. So anyway, he unfortunately his technology also goes to create another gas, which we're all too familiar with, which we use in a later war. These things kind of go. It's not just so this sword and the plowshare. Sometimes it's even the plowshare itself. I'm going to share with you one more thing, and I'm going to tell you an amazing Ksav Sofer, in which will leave us spinning, like the sword and the plowshare and the sword, and like leaving this spinning, our head spinning with hopefully an appetite for next week. Oh, that's so great. It's so great. At least he was able to feed the world artificial fertilizer. Well, that's great. That's wonderful. However, now, people know about environmental stuff, talking about over farming. Some people talking about overpopulating. Some people are thinking about the corn surplus in America, and what that does for our fast food industry, the ability to get so many bushels per acre, and what that does down the line. But what I want to point out is, did you know that after Nixon went to China, right? Some of us may remember that. Remote control. So let me just turn up the air conditioning. What the first thing China, after they established trade relations, what China ordered from America? Like 70, maybe 700, I don't remember, nitrogen fertilizer factories, because China was basically starving to death. They weren't, their population was like in China, and it just wasn't working. And so all of a sudden, this technology, 100 years later, 70 years later, what does it do? It basically creates, the evil empire who now, we're dealing with China and all. So, these things, as they flip and flop through the generation, they can take on different values. So I want to come back to Noach and show that the Chsav Sof, I could not translate this. I'll tell it to you about Peh, whoever wants can take it home and kind of work it out. He says, I don't get it. He wants to know, why was Noach punished? We'll go with it. Let's go with this verse here. It's the last source. It's the second to last source here. The end of all flesh, meaning people, has come before me. Why? Because the world is filled with villainy because of them, right? And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. What the earth do? What the earth do? So there's many different midrashim on this. Look at what does it mean, destroy them with the earth? Says the Medrash, for the earth was blotted out and washed away to the depth of 3 handbreadths, and to where the plowshare rules the earth. That was a literal translation by me. How deep did the flood go? 3 handbreadths, tfachim, shamachresha sholetet ba'aretz. As deep as the plowshare goes, that's what the flood wiped out. It's almost as though the flood deleted the impact. The little word is sholetet, controls. The plowshare controls, sholetet, rules over, dominates the earth. The flood just wiped that away. And I want you to read the rest to yourself. So says the Chsav Sof for something unbelievable. So, what did the earth do? What's wrong with the plowshare? How did the people get so villainous? How did the people get so corrupt?
Because they were bored.
Says the Chsav Sofer, yes, Noah was a tzaddik. Before he invented it, he was called a tzaddik tamim. Afterwards, he's called just a tzaddik without the tamim. You know why? Because it was for that, as you said, he doesn't exactly say that you said, but we should say that also. They had a hard life. They were working. They had to be tzavon tochalenu. They didn't have time for shtuyot. They didn't have a pleasure, that leisure time. They were dependent only on God, says the Chsav Sofer. Noah gave them achresha. They forgot about God. They were able to do it themselves. They were able to have a life of leisure and pleasure, which leads to the chamas, to the villainy. So can Noah say his hands were clean? And this is, I think, telling, because the Chsav Sofer, son of the Chassam Sofer, who was the great bastion against reform and enlightenment, but he was also living in the Industrial Revolution. He was saying, the revolution of what it meant to have factories, what it meant to have steam locomotives. And I can't help but wonder if this is revolutionary to say that what was, to Chazal was Geula to the world, also has the double edge, the other side of that plowshare. And so I think that what we can say today, to wrap it up, is that they were here before us. You can't ignore the pleasures, you can't ignore the pressures, you can't ignore the perils of technology, but it was way, way back, and we've always been grappling with this. And I think over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to try to come up with strategies that are called from Chazal. How do we reckon with these two sides, the Golus and the Geula, the Bracha and the Klala of the technology? We'll leave it at that. Questions, I'm happy to entertain.
But I just a comment that I know so many teenagers that are, because they're bored, they're depressed, and then tons of medications of depression or like suicide.
So yeah, Chazal said it, right?
Isn't intent a big part? Like I always thought when I learned this part about Noah, he's that his like that he's called Noah, but now it'll be easier to do all that stuff. And he was like, we're thankful to him, and now we can do other things like learn Torah and stuff like that, as opposed to someone who's using their technology to make a weapon.
So here you have a question, which I thought about a lot. When you say intent, whose intent? In other words, does it make a difference what the intent of the inventor was? I think that was, we're not gonna have time for this year's, I'm gonna tell you a regular lachas. I think that this was really what, did Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Reb Shimon, I'll tell you, he used the Roman bathhouse. He went to the Roman marketplace, even though he was so critical of them. What did he say? He says, you guys didn't intend the same Shemayim. It's for Torah, we want it for easier for you. You guys wanted it to make a buck. You wanted to control. You wanted it for this and for that. In other words, the question is does the intent of the user, of the inventor, the creator, have what impact does it have us on do we use or do we not use? Or abuse. To a certain degree, again, the class is over. If you want to leave, to a certain degree, and hopefully maybe we'll be able to deal with in the fourth class. As so many knowledgeable technologists tell us, technology today is not neutral. In other words, built into the design of the technology that we use, I'm talking about information technology, meaning digital technology. I don't know if it's true about the plow or the elevator, but built into the design, is the intent, is the wanting to invade privacy, to make money, to create addictions. So what? I could hear that. I could hear that. By the way, you should know. I don't want to give Haredim. So I've just been back and forth over the last. Part of the reason this sheet is so messed up is because my etrog and chaver internet filter and community guidelines have, as of a month ago, blocked out Safari.
Locked down.
What's Safari?
What's Safari? It's the leading platform for free for open use Torah.
Why was it locked out?
To quote them, it's filled with Christian and heretical material. So I've been back and forth with them on that one. So my big brother.
Your big brother?
So I've been back and forth. So
By the way, when you mentioned the Shimon Bar Yochai, that there's a Midrash that comes after this happened to learn it. In the end, he went and had these things fixed.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's if we ever do a shir on that.
What is that?
He had all
The end of the story.
The marketplace.
Everything, if you look at the end of that story, Masechet Shabbat, everything that he was critical of in the beginning of the story, which led to him going back to the cave, was actually things when he emerged from the cave that he either used or actually advanced or promoted, like the marketplace in Tiberia.
Yeah.
I have what to say about that, but it's not for now.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the Shaver, right? What Shaver said about the intent. What? So that's what I mentioned. That if you go through that, they can be blown away. Kaf Sofer, oh no, on Parshas Noah. Yeah. It's a Kaf Sofer, the son of the Chassam Sofer on the Parshas Noah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure.
We got to argue on the phone. That's great.
What?
People are coming to argue on telephone. This is great.